VMworld 2019. We're in the suites at the beautiful St. Regis, right across the street from the conference. It's been a heck of a show today.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of Kubernetes.
Yeah, a lot of Kubernetes. Yeah, we talk Kubernetes all the time.
And we are not going to let you down. We're going to talk more Kubernetes in a minute with our guest, Diane Gonzalez, who's been on the show. If you remember, we did the show at HPE Discover, and we talked about the Google Anthos announcement with Google and HPE. We're going to do a little bit more of a technical deep dive, but talk about HPE's dHCI. You talked about dHCI earlier today. How did that conversation go?
Yeah, I mean, we talked dHCI. Basically we talked about, greenfield customers, brownfield customers. Where does the dHCI come in? How does it work technically? And kind of how do you transition from having on-prem to, towards the cloud? Mm-hmm. And not entirely going into the cloud directly. I mean, customers do have existing investments. They have existing applications running. So how do you kind of leverage that and go and try out the cloud, step by step, very slowly, to get used to it and to maximize your investment?
So if you watched the video with Diane a couple of months ago, there was no easing into the cloud. This was a cloud discussion at HPE Discover. So I'm glad to have her on because she's going to whiteboard for us or lightboard for us the conversation around dHCI and extending dHCI into the cloud. Diane, tell us about this amazing solution.
All right, so let's talk about the solution. So we're going to start by talking about dHCI. That's the perfect actually place to start because it's the building block for this entire solution as it goes from the ground up. So a couple things. On premises, what we're going to have is our converged dHCI solution, which starts with our ProLiant servers, right? And then Nimble storage in a converged infrastructure, right? All right, so we've got Nimble, and we've got our ProLiant. All right, there's also some switching here, but the key points is that this is a converged solution, but it's managed as a hyper-converged solution, right? So we have here, tying this all together, VMware. All right? And what that's going to allow me to do is if I need to add more hypervisors to a solution because I need to scale out compute, I can scale out compute. If I need to add more storage, I can add more storage independently of each other. Everything is managed, by the way, through vSphere plugins, all of it. So if I need to provision capacity, maybe VMFS data stores, maybe I want to create some vVols or deploy some vVol VMs. All of that is done through our plugins with vSphere. Same time, if I want to add compute or scale up, right, I can add the hypervisors again through vSphere. So this is our dHCI solution, right? The D, disaggregated, HCI, because we're managing it very much as a hyperconverged solution. Now, to the magic. You said it exactly correctly. This is a cloud in-your-face solution when it comes to us discussing our hybrid cloud for containers. I'm going to start actually by talking about it from the general monolithic apps or your traditional applications. Why? Because one of the value adds of this dHCI solution is before we even layer on containerization on top of it, I can run my traditional workloads as well as my containerized workloads within the same platform, right? So with Nimble, we have a direct data path to cloud volumes. All right? All right. This is actually a portfolio product. We have several services here for your workloads that you have in the cloud. But we're able to replicate any data that we have sitting here directly to cloud volumes natively. That's a native data path. So it's a native and consistent data path. All of the APIs are in place for us to take the data from here to the cloud.
So does that have to be the same platform? So Cloud Volumes is that an abstraction of a Nimble solution, or is that more of what is that?
Excellent question. So what we actually have running here, in this particular solution that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about it very much from the block storage perspective because that's one of the service offerings that we have. It's actually our flagship service offering within the portfolio. And the way that we are replicating natively from on-premises environments to the cloud is because you're exactly right. This is built on nimble storage technology. So it's an in-plane data movement. We don't have an existing data mover that has plugins that is taking the data out of band and copying it block by block to the cloud, which means any changes that I make down on premises are incrementally then copied to the cloud, right? So rather than full copies, we're able to do incrementals, and we're able to leverage our native replication. So as soon as you have nimble array, which is the backbone of our dHCI solution from the storage perspective, you have immediate mobility to the cloud. Okay? Once it's in HPE Cloud Volumes, we can present data to any of the hyperscalers, be it AWS, Google, or Azure. So, what does that look like? Well, imagine I have in my ProLiant solution, I'm just going to pull an application out of the wind here, a traditional application. How about SQL Server? We actually have a fair amount of SQL Server deployed on nimble storage. And everybody, if you haven't thought about using vVols, you should be using them. Quite fantastic. A lot of VMworld was dedicated to vVols. Now you can take one of your vVols, your data vVols, right? You can replicate it to the cloud and immediately attach it to any compute in AWS, Google, or Azure. Why would you do that? Well, if, for example, I had a CI/CD pipeline I needed to do, I can replicate my data to the cloud, and then I can clone that data set any number of times to fulfill the pipeline. What if I wanted to do reporting in the cloud? Imagine a situation where I'm running on premises, right? And within my on-premises environment, of course, I have all of my governance. I'm able to meet any SLAs that I require. But let's imagine a situation where maybe I'm doing some collaborative work. Maybe this is healthcare. And I want to take some data from on-premises for the purposes of maybe data warehouse reporting or some sort of analytics to the cloud where I can create a DMZ and comfortably share it. First thing I'm going to want to do is de-identify that data, right? I can either do that on premises first with a clone and then replicate that clone, or I can move it to a clone into a secure network and then de-identify it and clone that into perhaps a DMZ. So all of these things are available to you. Any hybrid cloud workflow is now opened up. Let's just put it that way, rather than going through one of these line by line. Any hybrid cloud workflow is opened up. And let's not forget, last but certainly not least, DR and data protection. All of those things are available just by having this data path. So now, we have our infrastructure as a service component here by dHCI, managed as hyperconverged, so that simplicity is now brought to the table. We have a native data path to get the data to the cloud quickly, and then we can immediately provision to any one of the hyperscalers. All right? And it's for any workflow that we can imagine where we would need a copy of the data. Heck, we might have a cloud-first strategy and want this now to be the authoritative data set. One little thing to note before I move on, this is bidirectional. I can move data to the cloud, and I can move it back without egress. All right? When I present data to any one of these hyperscalers, like let's say I have a data set living here, and I decide that perhaps I like the analytics or some other APIs in Google, and I want to leverage them for perhaps a reporting workflow, I can either clone my data, present it seamlessly here, or I can completely move the data if I want. All of that is controlled by us. We own the provisioning of these links, seamless to the user and immediate. So technically, they're not even moving the data. We're just presenting it to them wherever they need it. So now, this all looks very fancy, and I've talked to you about how it's effective when we're talking about traditional applications. Now let's layer on Kubernetes as the application. This is where our partnership with Google, this was what was announced starting at Google Next, and then we expounded on it more at Discover. This is where this really comes to light. Because we've got our infrastructure as a service here. Now, with Kubernetes, Anthos is the key word here. And when we talk about Anthos, it's an umbrella of services, two of the major components being Kubernetes on-prem, or GKE on-prem, because it is a managed Kubernetes engine, right? So GKE on-prem and GKE in the cloud. Let's not forget, though, Anthos is a multi-cloud play. It can also manage AKS as well as EKS, all from the same Kubernetes console in GCP. I actually have a couple demos that will be coming out pretty soon to showcase some workflows with that. So now, infrastructure as a service is there. With Google Kubernetes Engine, we've now brought the cloud truly to the on-premises environment. We are now building containers as a service, or maybe even applications as a service, natively as if we would in the cloud. And the important part is, let's not forget this little data movement part down here, is when we talk about these containers as an ephemeral workload, it's easy, right? We can push that code anywhere, and we can pull those images anywhere else, apply the appropriate configurations. It's when that data is present, when our pods have persistent data, like let's say maybe you have a database pod, right, as part of your microservices architecture. When that pod goes down, you don't want to lose that data. We seamlessly manage that persistent data, not just on premises, but in the cloud. And the best part is we can move it. So now you can take the entire pod, including the data that has gravity, it has a tendency to stick. We solve that problem. You can take that entire application, including its data, to the cloud, to any cloud, for whatever one of these use cases you want to leverage that, that movement for.
Now, is that being orchestrated by the underlying cloud volumes and nimble integration? So I'm moving the pod, the Kubernetes pod, from my on-prem solution into the cloud, and seamlessly there's orchestration between the nimble platform, my dHCI, and the nimble that's been abstracted in the cloud?
Yeah. So that's an excellent question. Let me phrase it another way. All of your containerized workflows or pods orchestration, that's all part of Anthos. And it's a single pane of management, okay? Again, through the console. We have two methods of managing the data for the developer, because this wouldn't be a powerful story if all of a sudden, this developer persona, right, had to wait on Mrs. Storage Admin to provision some storage or replicate some storage. That's not going to work, right? So we have a Flex Volume plugin, and we also have CSI. Either one of those solutions to manage the persistent data seamlessly from the container interface, so the developer doesn't have to know anything other than how to write his YAML file. And it manages the data on the back end. As to your question of how we automatically get the data replicated from here to here, when a customer, let's say they have created a new pod specification, and in that pod specification, they want to create a persistent volume. When they go to create that, and they create their persistent volume claim, okay, they're typically leveraging a storage class that has information already written on it. And that information can be, for example, what I want to, it could be, for example, a platinum, a gold, or a silver storage class. And each one of these has information about, for example, how many IOPS I want to provision, what the throughput is. Anytime I create a persistent volume claim, it's going to, all volumes are going to have the same IOPS throughput. Perhaps, and here's the key, they also have the same protection template or different protection templates, right? It's within this protection template that not only local data protection is defined, but also that replication relationship. All of this is managed for the user through the container orchestration. So essentially, they don't have to leave that experience in order to do any of this. This is all the same runtime experience. And they would do the same thing in the cloud.
And so the admin sets this up beforehand?
So the storage classes would probably be provisioned by whoever your Kubernetes administrator, your infrastructure administrator would be.
Yeah. And so
but then the PVCs and everything else would be handled, of course, by the developer persona. And keep in mind that we have very, very flexible options available to us when we're talking about managing data. So for these storage classes that are just this, like for example, the platinum, gold, silver, you can also have a with overrides flag in them, which basically mean that anytime a PVC is created, whatever you define as available to override by the developer, they can override. Right? So it is very flexible, a very flexible framework. For example, if you want them to be able to override the volume size, you could do that. Or if you wanted them to be able to override perhaps the IOPS or throughput. Those are kind of unlikely things to allow them to override, but there are certain things that you can define. You can define anything you want to that allows the developer to override. Okay? But that's the solution in a nutshell. This is born of a partnership. We have two validated designs. All right, when it comes to a true hybrid cloud solution, because this is truly hybrid cloud. Again, we've gone beyond ephemeral workloads here. We're now talking about persistent data management as well. When we talk about true hybrid cloud, we mean the ability to take that from on-premises to the cloud, between clouds, so it's not just hybrid cloud, it's multi-cloud, and then back again. Right? And this is our true hybrid cloud solution for containerized workloads, and it's in partnership with Google Cloud. All right.
Thanks a lot, Diane.
Two validated designs, dHCI. I don't want to forget about saying this, but we also have a validated design with SimpliVity. But right now, this hybrid cloud, this true hybrid cloud, is only available with dHCI. Okay.
We really appreciate the breakdown. I've learned something today.
Me too.
Right,
yes. This can get really crowded quick.
So that was one of the better breakdowns I've seen of the value of dHCI, period. Like,
oh, yeah.
Especially as it relates to the cloud Kubernetes.
Oh, yeah, it came together. I mean, I understand dHCI in combination with the cloud.
So I know this is a sponsored CTO dose, but we'd love to hear your feedback. This will get posted to YouTube, Twitter, etc. Both I and you, Ben, Diane are all on Twitter. Tell us, what do you think? Is this a legit path from on-prem, managing workloads on-prem, and development processes on-prem, to extending it to the cloud? Love to hear the feedback. Until the next CTO dose, you can follow us on the web, thectoadvisor.com. Follow the hashtag